So we are going to start in Vajrasana. So knees together, heels together, and sitting back on your heels. If this is already too tight on your ankles, you can use a blanket or a pillow underneath your shins to kind of give a little bit more space for your ankles. If it's too much on your knees, you can use a block and bring the block between your heels and adjust the block to a side that is more comfortable. If you are sitting on your heels, reach behind and grab the front of your foot and just lift the front of your foot up so you can create a little bit more space in the front of your ankles. And then bring your hands to your thighs. Finding your sit bones either seated on your block or seated on your heels. So making sure that the hip points on the front of the hips are in a line, kind of creating that pelvic bowl with the back rim of your pelvis. So noticing if your pelvis is tilting too far forward or too far back, try to bring it into center, which your sit bones should then sit kind of in that neutral position. When the pelvis is in alignment, you may find that your ribs, the front of your rib cage, all automatically shifts back to where the bowl of your rib cage kind of mirrors the bowl of your pelvic rim. This brings your shoulders above your hips, creating that smile across the front of your collarbone, so opening, broadening the shoulders, the chest. Lightly drawing your chin in towards your neck and up towards your throat, creating space in the back of your neck. And then softening where you feel restriction still. So once you find the alignment of the spine, then soften around the edges. So allowing the tops of the shoulders to soften, the neck and the throat to soften. Allowing the tongue to rest gently on the roof of your mouth. Begin to shift your awareness to your breath. Noticing first in your body where you feel your breath more predominantly. Oftentimes when we create this open space within our thorax, within our body, the breath automatically shifts low into the lungs, allowing the side ribs, the back ribs to expand and feeling with that, the soft expansion all the way around the belly and the low back area. And start to shift into a natural breath. So neither making the breath too big or too long. Just notice your natural breath. And the softness, the quietness of the breath as it enters and exits through the nose. Allowing this moment just to transition, to tune in to our bodies, our breath, our mind, and become aware of the present, allowing all other thoughts or to do things to be set aside for a moment. As we come to our practice. And start to roll your shoulders a little bit, bringing them forward, up, and then back and down. Continuing to allow the breath to be natural, so not feeling the urge to match movement with breath. And switch directions. And find stillness again. Just take a couple of more breaths. And blink your eyes open. Shift forward, bringing your hands to the floor. We're going to go into my favorite yoga pose, so a toe stretch. You might notice my slight sarcasm there. So lean forward and tuck your toes under. Taking one hand at a time, reach back, grab your toes and pull them further forward, including the pinky in that. And then once you find that, start to ease back slowly. So using your fingertips to press your hips back towards your heels. So moving slowly, feet together, maybe the heels are together. And then once you find your sit bones on your heels, start to walk your hands closer to your knees, moving slowly. And then maybe bring them to your thighs. And then finding your pelvic bowl and your rib bowl mirroring, shoulders above your hips, hands resting down by your sides. Yes, this is not a comfortable pose. We're creating dorsiflexion in the ankle. So start to push the toes up towards your knees as you reach the heels back. And as you do this, you might start to feel a slight engagement of the muscles on the front of your shins. Oftentimes when this is uncomfortable, it's that lack of tibialis anterior, the muscle on the front of your shin that is a little sleepy, and the muscles on the back of your calf kind of being tight. So as uncomfortable as this is, just kind of notice where and how you can tolerate it. Shifting to your breath at any point, just to see if bringing your awareness to your breath, maybe finding your cues, chin tucked, neck long, collarbones wide, ribs down and in, hips in neutral. If shifting your awareness to different areas of the body allows you to kind of come out of that sensation in your toes and in your shins. We'll stay here for just 3 more breaths. So perhaps that can help to give you, oh, it's almost an endpoint. Can you make your exhalations a little longer? 1 more. And then shift forward, bring your hands to the floor. Turn the fronts of your feet onto the floor and just lightly pat the front of your feet onto the floor. So dorsiflexion, which is that action that we just did in the ankle, is a movement that's actually necessary to be able to create a hip hinge, that hip hinge in the front of your hip crease. So you can either tuck your toe, or if you're done with that, you can point your toe back. We're going to bring the right foot forward, toes in line with your left knee, and walk your hands back. So again, now you're just on your left knee. Your right knee is forward. If it's too much on the toe of the back foot, you can opt to point the toe back. Take your right hand to your right knee and gently start to push the knee straight forward. And at the same time, push your heel towards the back of your mat. Again, you're going to feel this kind of engagement on the front of your shin. So the right knee is pushing forward, the right heel is dragging back. Pause here for 2 more breaths. And yes, if this is too much, you can start to bring the hands down to the floor, which is going to take you deeper in the dorsiflexion of the front knee and put a little less pressure on your back toes. Shift forward to both hands. Untuck your back toes if they are tucked and sit back on your heel. See if you can go a little deeper into the dorsiflexion in the front ankle by leaning your belly onto your right thigh. So kind of allowing gravity to deepen this flexion in your front heel. Take the hands by your hips. Imagine this angle that you have in the front hip crease, what it would take to keep it if you lifted your heel off the ground. So start to pull the toes towards your shin and then walk your hands back. Keep the angle in your ankle and lift your heel off the ground, or the toes off the ground, keeping your heels on the ground. So a little dorsiflexion with engagement. Shift forward, bring the hands forward, bring both knees to the floor. Toes touch, knees wide, sit back in a child's pose. So taking a moment just to kind of let that energetic engagement go. Feeling the fronts of the ankles now stretch. And then we'll go to the other side. So come up to hands and knees. Option to tuck your right toes under or keep your toes pointing back. So again, this is using your awareness of your edge and how deep you want to go. And then start to lean back as you take your left toes in line with your right knee. Sit your hips back towards your heel. Take your left hand to your left knee and start to push your knee forward as you drag your heel back. So you're going to feel, again, engagement in the front of your shin. Believe it or not, a lot of hip issues come from this inability to hip hinge. And that can come from this belief that we shouldn't let our knees go over our toes. Every step that we take, our knees go over our toes. And limiting this range of motion in our ankle has actually created a lack of motion in our hip hinge, this deep hip crease. Bring the hands to the floor, shift forward. If you have tucked your toes under of your right leg, go ahead and point them back and then sit back. And again, you can lean forward, letting the weight of your upper body kind of move into the top of your thigh to allow gravity to start to deepen this dorsiflexion action more. So the knee is pushing forward as the heel is dragging back. Bring your hands beside your hips. Keep the awareness of the angle of your ankle, the angle between the top of your foot and your shin. And as you start to walk your hands back, lift your toes off the ground, keeping your heel on the ground, moving your toes towards your shin. So now you're asking this muscle to actively create the dorsiflexion. And release down, come forward. And again, knees wide, toes point back, toes together, shift the hips back and come into child's pose. So allowing that work of the front of the shin, the tibialis anterior to kind of let go and stretch. So internal rotation. Now we'll go to external rotation. So come to a seated position. Left shin on the bottom. Take your right ankle and place it on top of your left knee. Now this knee may be way up here. It may be sitting deep down on your ankle. Don't worry about that so much. Just have the ankle on your knee. We're going to lean back and then let your hands drop to the floor and just switch. So now bring the left ankle on top of the right knee. Lean back and switch. So we're just going to do this kind of rocking forward and back as we switch the ankle we put on top of the knee. And as we create this movement in the hip and this external rotation, maybe you start to create a little bit of a allowance to move the hands a little further forward as you start to rock forward. And if you don't, just stay where your edge is. Your knee never has to come down to the ankle. It may start to get closer. It may stay where it is. And kind of gauge, is there a point that you can start to shift even further forward? And if not, the movement itself is doing what it's creating some opening. So just kind of go with what your body's telling you. As you rock forward and back. And then the next time you bring the left ankle on top, come as close to upright as you can. Take your left hand and just place it on top of your left knee. Close your eyes. And you're not using the hand to push down. You're just bringing awareness of kind of a sense of release. Notice what you feel in your hip. Can you imagine the inhalation moving into those areas where you feel like your body is resisting? And can you use your exhale to maybe just encourage a little bit more of a release? And bring the hands back. Switch again. So now right ankle is on top of left knee. Take the right hand, place it on side of the inner right knee. Pause here. And use your awareness of your inhalation moving into the spaces where you feel your body resisting. And your exhalation to encourage a little bit more of a softening. And bring the hands behind you, rock back, cross your ankles and come forward to hands and knees. Have your blocks at the front of your mat on either side of your mat, just in case you might need them. Hands under your shoulders. Spread your fingers, first fingers parallel, knees underneath your hips. Toes can either be tucked under or pointing back. Inhale, lift your head, lift your hips, moving into cow pose. And exhale, drop your head between your arms, round your spine, tailbone points down, cat pose. So just take a few rounds of breath, feeling this natural extension on your inhalations and flexion of your spine on your exhalations. And then whenever you feel that you have this rhythm down, you can start to add a little bit of hip movement. So as you exhale, push your hips back towards your right heel. And as you inhale, roll up through your left side. So taking just a few rounds, moving in this direction. As you push back, feeling that hip hinge at the hip creases, feeling the legs kind of rolling in the hip sockets as you move in one direction, and then start to move in the other direction. So we're allowing all of the movements of that ball and socket joint to kind of enter into the body in this very safe, unloaded position. Feeling freedom of movement, hopefully, and allowing kind of the awareness of how you can move to create freedom where there's not. Then come up to hands and knees into neutral. Tuck your toes under, press your hips up and back as you come into downward facing dog. Start with the knees bent. Lift and spread your sit bones. Press the front of the thighs back as you start to move towards straightening your legs. Heels may still be off the floor. And then lift the heels off the floor as you lift the hips higher. Really firm the front of the thighs and press them back. Turn your heels to the right and drop both of your heels down, stacking your left heel in front of your right toes. Press a little bit more through your right heel, and then press a little bit more through your left heel. Inhale, come up onto your toes. Shift both of your heels to the left. Bring your heels towards the ground, stacking your right heel in front of your left toes. Press a little bit more through the left heel. Press a little bit more through the right heel. Inhale, come up onto both toes. And as you exhale, lower your heels towards the ground. Gaze between your thumbs. Inhale, reach your right leg up and back. Keep your left thigh pressing back and rotate your pelvis on top of your left leg, stacking your hips and then bending your right knee. So keep pressing the front of the left thigh back so that the ball of your leg bone pushes to the back of your hip socket. Straighten the leg as you square the hips and step your right foot up between your hands. Lower your left knee to the ground. Take the blocks on either side of your right foot. Keep the blocks on either side of your right foot so you have them there if you need them. Keep your left toes tucked under and walk your hands up to your right knee. Shift so that you find that your left hip is directly above your left knee, so you're not moving forward. You're in a 90 position in your left knee, and then your right ankle is directly below your right knee. So 90-degree angle in your right knee. Start to push your left hip forward as if you were wearing a pair of pants that had pockets, as if you were pushing the pocket forward. And start to set your hips back towards your left heel. And you may not go too far. You may also use the blocks here. And then as if you were pushing the pocket of your left hip forward, come back up. Sit the hips back. So hinging from your hips, you may use the hands on your blocks. You don't have to go all the way to your heel. You're kind of seeing where you can go. And then shift forward by pushing the pocket of your left hip forward. One more time, hinge from your left hip so the sit bone is going straight towards your heel, hands on the floor, the blocks, and then push the left pocket forward. Point the toes back, blocks can remain there. This time, hinge from your left hip crease, maybe allowing your right leg to straighten. So you can actually sit back on your heel, push your left pocket forward to come back into that 90-90 position. Hinge from your hips, sit your sit bone towards your left hip heel, and maybe straighten your right leg. So again, this is your own range of motion. You don't have to go as deep as I do. You're kind of using your edge as you move back and forward. One more time back. Push the hip pocket forward to come up into that 90-degree. Lean your hands forward. Tuck your left toes under and bring your left foot towards the right edge of your mat. And you'll open your chest to face the long edge of your mat. So now you're in an open position. Right knee is above right ankle. Left toes are tucked. This time we'll shift the hips back towards our left heel. So sitting the sit bone towards the left heel, push the left pocket open to come back upright. Right hand on the right knee, push the knee forward as you hinge out to the side. Shift back up. Sit bone goes towards left heel. Push the pocket forward. Right hand to right knee. Push the knee out over your right ankle. Do this just a few more times, kind of at your own pace. So you feel the hinge, the pocket push back and forward on the left hip. And this right knee goes straight over your second and third toe. So we're working now still with that dorsiflexion, as well as flexion and extension in your hip. Next time you come up, after you get that side flexion going, stay up. Straighten your right leg out to the side, pointing your toes forward, and bring your left hand either to the floor or to a block off to the side. You can keep your toes tucked or you can press them back. Reach, right arm up towards the sky. Press through the outer edge of your right foot. Walk your right foot back slightly, so step it back about a footprint. Take the left palm to either the floor or the block, and then start to come into a slight back bend. So reaching the right hand behind you as you roll your chest up towards the sky. Lift the torso parallel to the mat, right hand above the shoulder, gaze down at your left hand. Start to turn left toes away from you as you bring your hands, which is your back of your mat, and come into downward facing dog on this side. So we'll be switching the ends of the mats this whole practice. Lift up onto your toes, feet hip distance, slightly wider than hip distance apart. Shift both of your heels to the left. Drop your heels to the ground, stacking your right heel in front of your left toes. Push more through the left heel, push more through the right heel. Lift up onto your toes, turn them the opposite way. Dropping left heel in front of right toes. Push more through the right heel, push more through the left heel. Lift up onto your toes. Bend your knees slightly, lift and spread your sit bones. Push the fronts of the thighs back, move towards straightening your legs. Reaching your heels towards the ground. Keep the weight on your right leg, reach your left leg up and back, three-legged dog. Press the front of your right thigh back more. Then start to rotate your pelvis on top of your left leg, but right leg bone to open. And then bending, left knee reaching heel towards hip. Straighten the leg as you rotate the pelvis back to neutral. Draw knee towards nose and step left foot up between your hands. Right knee to the ground. Take your blocks on either side of your left foot. Use your blocks to press your chest away from your thigh. And then walk your hands up to your left knee. Position yourself so that your right hip is directly above your right knee. So that knee is 90 degrees. And then left heel is directly below left knee. So that's 90 degrees. Start to push your right hip forward. You can move the blocks back to give you a little bit more of a place to use your hands. And then push hip crease back, sending your right hip towards your right heel. So sit bone towards the heel. To come up, push as if you were wearing a pocket, that right hip forward to lift back up into that 90-90. So moving back, hip crease pushes back. So you're hinging from your hip and then pushing that same hip, that same area forward. Do it one more time with toes tucked. And figuring out your range of motion and come back up. Untuck the toe. So toes point back. Continuing with that awareness of pushing the hip crease back, moving the blocks back or hands to the floor, maybe sitting hips on the heel and flexing your front ankle. To come up, push the pocket forward to lift back up. And then hinging to come back down. So play with that for a while, really finding that awareness of the movement coming from the hip hinge, so flexion, and the hip extension. So you will have some movement in the spine, but what we're looking for is this awareness that our hip can move in flexion and extension. It's an action that we tend to lose. And it's an action that if we lose, we tend towards back pain or hip pain. This is one of the most important moves that our body does to do everything. Next time you come up, stay up. Tuck right toes under. Take the blocks forward. Move your right toes towards the left edge of your mat and rotate open. So now you're facing the long edge of your mat. Left knee is an external rotation. We're gonna hinge from our right hip, so push the hip crease back, sending the sit bone towards your right heel. Push the pocket forward to lift up. Left hand on the knee. Push the knee over the toes. Come up. Hinge, so push the hip crease straight back, sit bone on heel, push that part forward, and then knee drives straight over your second and third toe. So you're finding your depth of dorsiflexion and rotation and flexion in the knee that's up, and you're just moving through hip extension and flexion in the knee that's on the floor. And the spine is staying in that our cues of chin tucked, neck long, collarbones wide, ribs in, front and back of the pelvis in neutral. Next time you come up, stay up. Bring left leg out, toes point forward. Press down through the left outer edge of your foot. You can move your hand to the floor, either on fingertips or on the block. Bring left arm above left shoulder. Keep reaching through the outer edge of your left foot. Then lift the left foot, take it back about a footprint. Palm to the block or to the floor. Rotate right rib cage towards left as you reach left arm up and behind you to find a slight back bend. Come back to neutral. Shoulder above, wrist above your shoulder, gaze down at your right hand. Turn the right foot towards the back edge of the mat, hands to the floor. Step back to downward facing dog. This time, move while you're in down dog. So bending one knee and then the other. Keeping in that neutral plane at first. So finding the hip crease, the hip hinge as you bend the knee straight forward. And then finding a little extra movement as you bend the knee towards the other side. So as you bend the right knee, push it to the left and start to let your hips sway to side to side. So as if your dog is wagging its tail. And come back to neutral. Lift up onto your toes as you gaze between your thumbs. Bend your knees and step to the front of your mat. Feet hip distance apart, outer edges of your feet parallel. Bend your knees. Bend your knees deep enough that you can bring your fingertips to the floor. Start to push the knees forward as you pull the hip creases back. Hug the outer hips in. Exhale, move towards straightening the legs as you allow the head to fall towards the floor. Keep your knees towards straight, hands to shins. Inhale, lift up halfway. Lower ribs in. Exhale, knees bent or straight, fold forward. Inhale, reach or stretch as you come up, arms over your head. Exhale, hands to heart center, and pause in Tadasana, mountain pose. So slowing down your breath. Noticing the sensations you're feeling in your hips. So we've worked to kind of open up some of those areas that tend towards resistance or tend towards being tight, and moving slowly with awareness of feeling our edge and moving towards our edge in order to create more space. So now we're going to move towards standing positions that may increase awareness of the work that we just did. But again, also moving with awareness of what our edges are and kind of feeling with that as we move towards progressing into a deeper, more loaded hip opening. So come to the center of your mat, facing the long edge of your mat. Step or hop your feet wide, and ankles are below your wrist. Bring your hands to your feet, keeping the outer edges of your feet parallel. So we now know where that hip crease is, where we hinge. We're going to move a little, so with slow awareness, take your hands to your pelvis. And if you are facing the camera, you can use your awareness to look at yourself, to notice the tendencies of your hips as you sway side to side. So lighten your knees, so kind of create a soft bend in your knees. We're going to shift to the right. And as you shift, try to keep your pelvis in neutral. So knee bends over your second and third toe. Hinge from your right hip crease, so bringing your torso closer towards the floor. And then lifting your pelvis off the knee, come to an upright position as you press through the outer edge of the left foot and the ball mount of the big toe of your right foot. Keep the knee pointing out. Start to shift to the left. So come up to neutral. Keep the hips in neutral as you start to bend the left knee over your second and third toe. Hinge from your hips, so pull the hip back as you take your torso parallel to the floor. So hip crease pulls straight back, knee continues to point over second and third toe. And then peel your hip point off, so legs stay still as you come into an upright position, and then shift back to neutral. We'll do this 2 more times. So awareness, pelvis stays in neutral as you start to bend your right knee, and then start to tilt pelvis forward as you hinge from your right hip crease. Notice if your hip shifts forward, keeping your hips in alignment. Press to the outer edge of your left foot, big toe of your right foot. Lift your torso, legs don't move. Press through the outer edge of your left foot, big toe of your right foot, knee stays over second and third toes. Shift up. Keep your pelvis in neutral. Start to bend left knee over second and third toes. Hinge from your hips as you take your pelvis parallel to the floor. Big toe of left foot, outer edge of right foot. Keep your legs where they are. Peel your hip point off your left thigh. Pelvis stays in neutral. Shift back up. One more time to the right. So keeping that awareness of your pelvis in neutral. Hinge. Outer edge left foot, big toe right foot, press down, lift up, torso. Outer edge right foot, big toe left or right, big toe right foot left. Outer edge, shift back up. Last time to the left. Knee bends, pelvis doesn't move. Hinge. Deep in the hip crease. Big toe left foot, outer edge right foot. Peel your torso off your thigh. Outer edge right foot, big toe left foot, knee still pushes out. Hinge or straighten the legs. Heels in, toes out. Goddess pose, hands to heart. So knees over your ankles. Just allow yourself to lightly sway side to side. So tailbone points down. Pelvis is still on that neutral. So notice the tendency for your pelvis, the front of the hip points to move down and your lower back to arch, and try to create more of a neutral. We're just hinging a little side to side. Notice what you feel in your hips. Then straighten the legs. Turn the toes forward. Hinge from your hips and fold forward. Prasarada, Padottanasana, extended leg forward fold. Come up, hands to the floor, shoulders above your wrist. Press down through the big toe mounts of your feet, outer edges of your feet. Roll your inner thighs back, hug your outer hips in, and then fold back into a forward fold. Keep pressing the fronts of your leg bones back towards your hamstring muscles. Inhale, lift up halfway, shoulders above your wrist. Turn your toes out slightly. Start to bend your right knee over your second and third toes as you walk your hands to the right side of your mat. Hinge your hip back, so pull it back as you press your knee over your second and third toe. Walk your hands to the left as you bend your left knee. Hinge your hips, so pull the left hip towards the back long edge of your mat. And just move side to side a little bit, finding your edge, your range of motion, what you're comfortable with. Becoming more and more aware of your ability to hip hinge as we move deeper. Next time you come to the right, stay to the right. If you can keep your heel on the ground, great. If you cannot, you can lift it as you start to straighten your elbows and lift your torso away from the ground. Flex your left ankle and point your toes up towards the sky. So Skandasana. Bring your hands to the floor, press down, lifting your hips away from the floor. Walk towards your left foot and rotate your hands on either side of your left foot, reaching your right heel towards the sky. Bend your right knee to the ground. Keep the toes tucked or pointing back. Inhale, reach your arms over your head. So coming into a low lunge. This time allowing the hip, the back, the right hip to move forward as you push the left knee forward. Hands can come to the floor on either side of your left foot. Slowly walk your hips back. Move towards straightening your left leg. Toes point up. Bend your left knee, foot to the ground. Inhale, reach your arms over your head. So coming into Anjaneyasana. Hands come to the floor. Move your hips back, walking your hands back, straightening your left leg, toes point up towards the sky. One more time through this rotation, foot to the ground, right, left knee bends, arm comes over the head. Anjaneyasana. Fold forward, hands on either side of your left foot. Push your hips back. Move towards straightening the leg. The hip doesn't have to go all the way back like we did before. Bring your left foot to the ground. Take your blocks on either side of your left foot. Shift forward to bring your right foot to the ground. Heel drops down. Move towards straightening your left leg. Press hands down to the blocks. They can be whatever level you need them to be at. Lift torso parallel to the floor. Take a breath in. And as you exhale, fold out over your left leg. Pause here. Slow down your breath. Press hands to the floor, to the blocks, lift up halfway. Throw the blocks to the other end of your mat. Bend your knee, walk your hands towards the long edge of your mat, toes facing the long edge of your mat. So we're back into that extended leg forward fold. Firm the front of your thighs, roll your inner thighs back, press through the big toes. Roll the outer hips back and hug them in, press through the outer edges of your feet. Exhale, hinge forward, allowing the head to release towards the floor. Continue to press the fronts of the thighs back to keep the hamstrings long and the legs engaged. Use your hands to press up halfway. Turn your toes out, heels in. Bend your knee over your left toe as you walk your hands towards the left side of your mat. Straighten your leg, start to walk your hands towards the right side of your mat as you bend your right knee over your second and third toe. Make this transition a couple of times from side to side, allowing yourself to feel into your edge, noticing where you can let go comfortably. The next time you come to your left side of your mat, stay there. Heel either remains on the ground or comes off the floor as you point your right toes up towards the sky. So Skandasana, using your hands on the floor, feeling that hip hinge in your left hip crease. Notice your resistance to the hip hinge. And then start to press down through your hands as you lean forward. Move, walking your hands towards your right foot. Framing your right foot as you come onto your right or left toes. Bend your left knee to the ground. Toes can either stay tucked or pointing back. Inhale, lift up, arms over your head. So Anjaneyasana. You can push this left hip forward now. Hinge deep into the front hip crease. Start to push the hips back as you move towards straightening your right leg. Hands can come to the floor. Move through this transition several times, still with the awareness of the hinging of both of your hips and the extension of your back hip as you move into the low lunge or Anjaneyasana. Next time you come forward, stay forward. Fold forward, bringing your hands to the blocks on either side of your right foot. Lift your back knee off the floor. Step your left foot up slightly, lowering the heel to the ground. Move towards straightening your left leg, remembering your blocks are there. Inhale, spine parallel to the floor. Move your inner thighs towards each other like a pair of scissors as you fold forward. Hug your outer hips in towards your midline. Roll your inner thighs back. Inhale, lift up halfway. Move the blocks towards the middle of your mat. Bend the front knee. Walk your hands towards the long edge of your mat, so coming back into wide-legged forward fold. Press the big toe mounts, roll your inner thighs back. Peaky toe mounts, roll your outer hips back. Hinge forward and breathe. Keep pressing the fronts of your leg bones back. So we're going to start to add a little movement for one more repetition through this flow. Lift up halfway. Bring your hands to your hips and lift all the way back up. Turn your toes out. So this time, we're gonna move into Skandasana from an upright position. So we'll move towards the right first. So hands can be at your heart. Remember, you can use your hands when you shift to come to the floor, but maybe you don't. So start to bend your right knee over your second and third toe as you come into that lateral side lunge. The hands can come to the floor, you can hold them at your heart. Flex your left toes up towards this guy. Either hands to the floor or not, walks you to the front of your mat. Hands aligning that left foot onto your right toes. Drop your right knee. Inhale, come up, Anjaneyasana. One time, shift back, Ardha Hanumanasana. Straighten your front leg, reach your arms back or to the floor. Inhale, lift up, Anjaneyasana. Hinge from your front hip crease, framing your front foot with your blocks or the floor. Step left foot or right foot up as you come into pyramid pose. Inhale, spine parallel to the floor. Exhale, fold forward, head reaches towards left shin. Pause here. Roll your inner thighs back. Hug your outer hips in. Lift up halfway. Take your right hand to the inside of your left foot. Reach your left hand to your lower back. Inhale, lengthen your spine. As you exhale, start to rotate your chest into a twist. So to the left. Maybe hand stays on your hip. Maybe left hand reaches up. Bring both hands back to your blocks. Move the left hand out to the left a little bit more. Turn your left toes to the left edge of your mat. Lift your right heel off the ground and rotate it towards the right side of your mat. Walk your hands so that both hands are on the left side of your mat. Pause here. If this is comfortable, stay here. This is quite a hip twist. Otherwise, you could keep your right hand on the block. And again, either lift your left hand to your hip or reach it up towards this guy. Release your left hand to the floor. Start to bend your right knee to the ground and lower your hips inside of your left heel or right heel, and your left foot is outside of your right knee. So we're coming into a twist. So hug your left knee with your right elbow as you reach your right hand, left hand behind your hip and twist open. And gaze over your left shoulder. Rotate back towards the mat, both hands to the mat, and roll all the way back into that wide leg forward fold. Hands to your hips, lift all the way up. Last side, so toes point out. We're shifting towards the left heel, coming into that lateral lunge as we straighten and point right toes up towards this guy. Either hands to the floor or heart. Press down to walk, hands towards framing right foot. Drop left knee to the ground. One time, rise up, Anjaneyasana. Shift back, straightening right leg, reach the hands to the floor or reach back, Ardha Hanumanasana. Foot to the floor, arms over the head, Anjaneyasana. Hands to the floor on either side of your right foot. Step your left foot up slightly. You can move to get your blocks if you need them. Inhale, spine parallel to the floor. Roll inner thighs back. Hug outer hips in. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, lengthen the spine. Lift halfway up. Keep your left hand inside of your right foot and twist towards the right. Right hand to the hip. Hug the hips in, roll the inner thighs. Maybe right hand reaches up. Bring both hands back to the floor. Bend the right knee. Walk the right foot out, turn the right toes out. Lift the left heel, turn the left heel the other way. Walk both hands towards your right foot and beyond towards the right edge of your mat. Pause here. You can either stay in this, you can keep your left hand on the block and bring your right hand to your hip, or you can reach right hand up. Bring your hand back to your block. Start to bend your left knee to the ground. Sit your hips on the inside of your left foot. Step your right foot outside of your left knee, and then twist towards your right knee, hugging your right knee as you bring your hand, right hand behind your hip. Twists are really hard to cue. Rotate back towards the front of your mat. Hands to the mat, step back for one short breath in downward facing dog. Gaze up between your hands, step or hop to the front of your mat to a seated position. Heels to the floor in line with your sit bones. Reach your arms forward and slowly roll down to your back. Step your feet wide, windshield wiper your knees side to side. Letting go of excess tension in your spine and your hips. Then hug your knees in towards your chest. You can either stay here in stillness or add the rocking here as well. And when you're ready, stretch your legs long. Arms down beside your body, palms up. Shifting and adjusting to feel an even amount of weight on either side of the spine, the hips, the shoulder blades. Come back into the space of the breath. Feeling the breath naturally start to slow down. The awareness that the breath is moving deep into the lungs. Feeling a soft expansion of the ribs outward. An easy release of the ribs inward as you exhale. Moving into the space of the mind, allow the breath, the sensation of the breath within the mind to quiet with each breath. Can you find a space where you can barely hear the breath within your mind? Can you soften the breath to the point where you can barely feel your breath as it wisps in and out through your nostrils? And start to deepen your breath. And reach your arms over your head, reach through heels or toes, finding inner body length. Moving slowly with awareness. Bend your knees and roll onto your side body. And taking a moment to check in with your body. Revisiting the breath. And noticing the mind. And using your hands, slowly press yourself up to a seated position, keeping the eyes closed and the head heavy until you come to an upright position. And bringing your hands to meet at heart center. Allowing your thumbs to rest on your breastbone, connecting to the space deep within. Thank you so much. Hopefully, became a little bit more aware of the movements of the hips that are natural, those movements of the hips that we avoid, and stepping into those places with awareness, with with ease and allowing yourself to kind of explore regions to open up to again. So thank you. The divine in me honors the divine in you. Namaste.